I never thought betrayal could come dressed as a smile. On the day that was supposed to be mine, my college graduation, I stood proud in my gown, waiting for my family's approval. My brother stepped beside me, and in an instant, my mother's face lit up with pride. The camera clicked, capturing his moment of glory. When I tried to step into the frame, her words cut through me like a knife. "Mia, move out of the frame." In that instant, I realized I wasn't part of the family portrait. I was the shadow they wanted erased. I was 20, the kind of age that still smells like campus coffee and damp library stacks. And I treated my days like a syllabus. Finish the reading, ace the quiz, and maybe, finally, earn a soft look from my mother. My brother Ethan could wander in late to Sunday dinner and be greeted like a returning astronaut. I arrived early carrying dessert I bought with my campus job, and my mother would ask whether I had remembered to apply for more internships, her mouth tightening at the word more. At first, I told myself she was just practical, just busy, just tired. It was in the little things. Ethan's favorite cereal always restocked, my almond milk forgotten. His scraped knee stories from intramural basketball drew rounds of laughter. My scholarship letter sat unopened on the counter until I slid it beneath the fruit bowl so it wouldn't get stained by spilled juice. When he announced he might switch majors again, my mother stroked his hair and said, "Follow your heart." When I mentioned a professor had invited me to a research lab, she asked if it paid enough to cover textbooks. The day I stopped blaming fatigue and started seeing a pattern, we were in the kitchen. Ethan had forgotten to take out the trash again, and the smell of onion skins and damp cardboard hung in the air. My mother waved it away and reached for the good plates because his friend was coming over. "Mia, would you mind grabbing sodas?" she asked, and when I returned balancing too many cans in my arms, she laughed, an indulgent warm sound I hadn't heard in weeks, and told Ethan, "Look at your sister, always so helpful." The warmth was for him. The helpfulness was a chore. I began to count the slights the way other people count steps on a treadmill. The totals rose no matter how fast I went. I ironed my own blouse for a departmental awards ceremony and found a lipstick shade that made my teeth look whiter. And when I walked down the stairs, my mother glanced up, almost startled, and told me the hem needed steaming. Ethan came down with a stained hoodie and she said, "Handsome," without irony. That night, squeezing between jackets in the hallway closet, I found a shoebox of old photos. Not albums, just loose prints, curling at the edges like the past trying to recede. I sat cross-legged on the floor, dust rising, and sorted my life into glossy rectangles. In picture after picture, my mother's arm wrapped around Ethan's shoulders, his cheeks flushed with cake or sun or victory. When I did appear, I was off to the side, mid-blink or half-cropped, a witness rather than a subject. It felt accidental until I noticed how many times my mother's face turned away from me, like sunflowers refusing shadow. I pressed my finger to one image where my hair flew across my mouth, wind-blown and inconvenient, and wondered how long I had been inconvenient. The question arrived quietly, like a fog that only I could feel sliding under the door. What if I wasn't really theirs? I hated myself for thinking it. I looked like my father around the eyes, people said, and my laugh sometimes startled awake like my mother's when I forgot to be careful. But the thought stayed, hard and bright, because it explained the ache. If I wasn't fully theirs, the distance made sense. If I was, then why did love keep missing me by inches? I started listening at doors the way I used to listen for exam answers in study groups, alert and ashamed. Snatches of conversation drifted down hallways, my mother saying, "He needs space to figure things out," in that indulgent tone reserved for Ethan. My father replying, "And Mia?" A pause, the clink of a glass. My mother's sigh. "Mia will be fine. She's always fine." It was almost funny. I had never been less fine. In the evenings, I read old journals I found stacked under my bed, entries from middle school lined with neat, hopeful handwriting that begged for approval like extra credit. On weekends, I became a curator of evidence. I examined frames on the mantel and compared them to backup files on my phone. I noticed the way my mother angled her body in photos, shoulder turned toward Ethan, chin tipped away from me. I noticed how often she volunteered to take the picture when I stood nearby, how rarely she asked someone else to capture all of us. One photo later appeared on her social media with 3 red hearts. Afterward, my aunt squeezed my hand, whispering a secret I deserved to know. That night, I opened a frame and found a family portrait with no me there. I threw myself into academics like it was a survival game. Every grade a shield, every award a chance to be seen. In lecture halls, while students whispered about parties, I memorized case studies until my pen bled ink into the margins. I applied for scholarships with the desperation of someone trying to buy their place at a dinner table. And when the acceptance letters arrived, fat and promising, I lined them neatly on the kitchen counter where my mother could not ignore them. She looked at them, skimmed one, then asked Ethan if he had figured out his summer plans. I swallowed the sting, reminding myself that recognition came slowly, that maybe love was cumulative. If I stacked enough achievements high enough, surely the weight would press through. There were ceremonies where my name was called, the syllables sharp and proud in the microphone, and I stood, smiling stiffly while applause rang around me. I imagined, in those moments, that my family would glow with pride. But when I searched the crowd, I saw my mother checking her phone, my father clapping politely, Ethan waving half-heartedly before leaning over to talk to a friend. The photographs afterward confirmed it. My smile was earnest, theirs distracted. One evening, a professor clasped my shoulder and whispered, "You've got real potential. Don't waste it chasing approval." I laughed it off, but the words lingered like an echo I didn't want to hear. Approval was the only currency I knew at home. The night I brought home a plaque for outstanding research, I placed it on the table as if it were a crown. My mother brushed crumbs from the surface and said, "Ethan, what do you want for dinner to celebrate?" The air went thin around me. Ethan shrugged, asked for pizza, and the conversation rolled on as though my plaque were just decoration. That was when I felt the first fissure, a crack running through the fantasy that one more triumph would finally matter. My victories had become invisible ink. I studied harder, stretched thinner. Late nights hunched under fluorescent lights. My hands trembled from too much coffee. I joined every organization that would have me, not because I wanted to, but because bullet points on a resume looked like reasons to be loved. Friends drifted away, confused by my absence at Friday gatherings. My skin grew pale, my chest heavy with exhaustion. But I told myself this was what it meant to earn worth. In the quiet of my dorm room, I sometimes sat cross-legged on the bed, music playing low through my headphones. Sad songs filled the space where laughter should have been. There were nights I stared at the ceiling and imagined erasing myself, just to see if anyone noticed the gap. Those were the pauses, the silent troughs between battles, where even I didn't believe my performance anymore. Then came a twist I never expected. I had been scribbling stories in notebooks for years, scraps of dialogue, half-formed scenes I never showed anyone. They were my secret relief valves. One afternoon, my best friend Leah dropped by unannounced and caught me bent over a draft. She read a page before I could snatch it away. "Do you realize?" she said, eyes wide. "This is better than half the plays I've seen here." I laughed nervously, but she didn't. "Mia, you don't just write. You bleed on the page. Maybe it's time to stop proving yourself their way and start telling your story your way." Her words settled into me like seeds. For the first time, I considered that achievement might not have to look like plaques and scholarships. Maybe the truest achievement would be dragging the truth out of shadows, putting it into words no one could ignore. I stared at my notebooks later that night, the ink blotted where tears had fallen. For years they had been private, my confessions to an audience of none. But maybe they were my weapon. If I couldn't force my family to see me, I could make the world see instead. The decision formed quietly, not a battle cry, but a vow whispered in the dark. I would turn my pain into something undeniable. My silent rebellion would no longer be silence. At first, it was nothing more than an experiment. I sat at my desk with the blinds drawn, and my phone propped against a stack of books. My voice shook as I read from one of the scripts I'd scribbled in my notebook. The scene wasn't dressed up with props or fancy lighting. Just me. A shaky monologue about a girl who tried to win her mother's love with trophies. When I hit upload, I told myself no one would see it. Maybe a handful of views. Maybe silence. By morning, silence had shattered. Thousands of people had watched. Comments scrolled faster than I could read. This hit too close. "Is this real? Please tell me it's not real. I thought I was the only one." The video spread like a confession passed from hand to hand, whispered across strangers' phones. My inbox overflowed with messages from people who saw themselves in my words, who knew the sharp sting of being the forgotten child. I filmed more. Each time I peeled away another layer of armor, letting rawness leak through. Sometimes in the middle of a take I broke down crying, my voice fracturing, and I left it in. Those moments of collapse resonated more than polished lines ever could. People told me they replayed those seconds, not because they enjoyed watching pain, but because it made them feel less alone in theirs. My grief became a mirror. Between uploads, I paused for long stretches, head bent against my knees, the quiet pressing against me. Those pauses weren't empty. They were breath for me and for the audience, spaces where we mourned together. I learned that silence, too, could be storytelling. But the internet isn't a one-way mirror. One evening, as I scrolled through comments, my finger froze. A username with no profile picture, no history, wrote, "I know why your mother hates you." My stomach dropped. For minutes I stared, rereading it, the words glowing with menace and promise. Did someone truly know? Or was it a troll? Either way, the thought burrowed into me, a parasite I couldn't shake. I doubled down on my work. If I couldn't control the answers, I could at least control the story. I began to blur truth and fiction, weaving dramatized dialogues into scripts. One episode painted my mother as a tragic figure trapped by her own grief. Another as a cold matriarch hungry for control. My viewers didn't mind the ambiguity. They loved it. "It's so real but so cinematic," they said. "You make me cry every time." A fan base formed, not massive but fiercely loyal, dissecting every frame like detectives in search of hidden meaning. I leaned into the blur, creating a world that was half memoir, half myth. My bedroom became a stage. I rearranged lamps for moody lighting, wrote music on an old keyboard to underscore monologues, even stitched together old family photos with voiceovers. I was not just telling my story anymore. I was world-building. Among my followers, a subset began writing fan fiction. They expanded on my scripts, imagining alternate timelines where the daughter found secret strength, or where the mother wasn't cruel, but cursed. They sent me links to sprawling narratives where my life was twisted into fantasy, with me recast as heroines with swords or wings. Some of it unsettled me. Some of it moved me to tears. They were building me a mythology I had never asked for, yet one I found myself stepping into. The twist came the night my mother found it. I never meant for her to stumble across my channel. She wasn't tech-savvy, barely knew how to use group texts, but one of her friends must have shared a clip. I woke up to dozens of missed calls and a single text from her, stark in its brevity. "We need to talk." I sat on my bed, the phone heavy in my palm, heart hammering. For weeks I had poured secrets into a faceless crowd, thinking the distance kept me safe. Now the wall between my worlds had cracked. My audience, who saw me as brave, didn't know that behind the screen I was trembling, caught between relief and terror. Relief that she finally saw me, terror at what she might do with that sight. In that moment, my rebellion no longer felt silent. It had reached the one person I had always been fighting against, and the battlefield I knew was about to shift from the internet to my own living room. The night of my aunt's birthday dinner was supposed to be festive. Candles, roast chicken, clinking glasses. I sat at the long dining table, shoulders stiff, trying to pretend my channel didn't exist. My mother's eyes never left me, sharp and unwavering, as though daring me to speak first. When dessert arrived, she finally broke the silence. "You need to stop this nonsense online," she said, her fork scraping porcelain. "People are talking. You're embarrassing the family." The room stilled. My father adjusted his glasses, pretending to be absorbed in the cake. Ethan pushed berries around his plate, avoiding my gaze. My aunt coughed into her napkin, but no one else spoke. Something inside me snapped. My throat burned. My eyes stung. And before I could stop myself, words tore out of me. "You've never chosen me. Not once. You parade Ethan like he's the golden child. And I'm just... what? An extra? A mistake?" My voice cracked. I expected silence to swallow me whole, but instead the sound ricocheted across the table. For the first time in years, I wasn't holding back tears in private. I was crying in front of them all. The forks froze. My father's eyes darted to my mother, waiting for her cue. My aunt sat rigid. And Ethan looked at me differently, his brows drawn tight, as though he was finally seeing something he'd tried to ignore. The silence dragged, thick and suffocating. Then, unexpectedly, Ethan spoke. "She's not lying," he muttered, his voice low but clear enough. Every head turned. He swallowed hard, then went on. "I've known. For years. I didn't want to say it because I didn't want to lose what little I had." The words hit like shrapnel. My chest caved and expanded at once. Oh, he had known. All this time he had seen me drowning and chosen to look away. My mother's face darkened, but she said nothing. The table erupted into fragmented voices. My aunt tried to interject. "Maybe this isn't the time." But my father's voice trembled over hers. "We can't do this here." My mother shook her head, her jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might snap. When the shouting faded, there was only fracture. My father retreated into silence, as if neutrality could save him. My mother doubled down, accusing me of exaggeration, calling my videos stories and fabrications. Ethan folded into himself, pale and ashamed. The air was thick with division. I couldn't breathe. I stood, chair legs screeching across the floor, and stumbled to my room. My suitcase sat in the corner like it had been waiting. I threw clothes in without folding, tears streaming, each item a reminder of years of invisibility. By the time I dragged the suitcase down the stairs, rain lashed against the windows. My family stayed in the dining room, voices muffled now, unwilling to chase me. I stepped outside into the storm, the handle of my case biting into my palm, the streetlights blurred in the rain, turning the world into streaks of silver and shadow. I walked, not knowing where I was headed, only that I couldn't stay. The rain plastered my hair to my face, my breath sharp in the cold night air. People stared from passing cars, but I didn't care. For the first time, I let myself be seen in my brokenness. No performance, no perfection. Just raw exit. The silence of the night wrapped around me once the rain slowed. I stood under a flickering lamppost, clutching my suitcase, feeling the weight of leaving everything familiar. My chest hurt, but there was also a strange lightness. Pain, yes, but also release. Headlights approached slowly, then stopped beside me. The car door swung open, and my aunt stepped out, umbrella in hand. She didn't scold or question. She just held out the umbrella and said softly, "Come on, child." In the car, the heater blasting, she handed me a manila envelope. Her eyes glistened, the weather from rain or something deeper I couldn't tell. "This is the truth about our family," she whispered. "It's time you knew." The envelope was heavy in my lap, heavier than paper had a right to be. My pulse thundered in my ears as I traced the edge with trembling fingers. Whatever lay inside wasn't just history. It was the key to why I had always been a shadow in my mother's eyes. The envelope felt like a stone on my lap, heavier than anything I had ever carried. I sat at my aunt's kitchen table, rainwater still dripping from my hair, and tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a faded birth certificate. The name on the paper wasn't mine. It was another girl's, my mother's daughter, born years before me, and gone before she reached her second birthday. My chest tightened as I read the details. Same last name, same delicate features captured in a photograph tucked behind the page. She had the same dark hair, the same wide eyes. For a dizzying moment, I thought I was staring at my own baby picture. My aunt reached across the table, her hand warm on mine. "Your mother never healed from losing her," she whispered. "When you were born, you looked so much like her. She loved you, but it terrified her, so she pulled away." The realization tore through me. All the years I had begged for affection, all the times I had watched her beam at Ethan. It wasn't just favoritism. It was fear. Loving me meant reopening a wound she never wanted to touch. My anger faltered, tangled with grief I didn't know how to hold. I stumbled upstairs to the guest room, pulled out a notebook, and began to write. At first, the words came jagged, furious, accusations, questions, pain, but slowly, they softened. I wrote about the little girl, whose picture I had seen, about the way her absence had haunted our family, like a ghost. I wrote about my mother's fear, and for the first time, I imagined what it must have felt like for her to bury a child who looked like me. Hours passed. The pen left smudges across my hand, but I didn't stop. Somewhere in the haze of ink and tears, my anger bent into empathy. It didn't erase the years of neglect, but it added a layer I hadn't known existed. When the sun rose, light poured across my journal pages. I felt a strange calm. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, I had more than fury inside me. I had understanding, fragile, but real. Then my phone rang, the screen lit with my mother's name. My stomach dropped. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me knew I had to answer. Her voice was broken, trembling. "Mia, I'm sorry. I've been so wrong. I see it now. I can't change the past. But please, can you give me another chance?" I didn't answer right away. My silence stretched across the line, heavy with everything she had never said. For once, I wasn't a desperate child waiting for her affection. I was someone who could choose. That choice reshaped me. I decided I wouldn't cut her off, but I also wouldn't surrender myself. If she wanted a daughter, she would have to learn how to love me fully, not halfway. In the days that followed, I started speaking publicly about my story. Not just in videos, but in forums, blogs, and online groups where others like me gathered. I told them about favoritism, about the scars it leaves, about the ghosts that live in families. People reached out saying, "This is my story too. You said what I never could." A community formed. Survivors of invisible childhoods, of parents who loved in lopsided ways, found each other through my words. Together we built a space where being unseen was no longer a sentence, but a shared truth. I felt power surge through me, not the power of grades or plaques, but the power of solidarity, of knowing my pain could be a lantern for others. My videos shifted, no longer just raw confessions, they became conversations. I invited people to share their own stories, blending their voices with mine. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a voice, steady and unafraid. Then one morning an email arrived with a subject line that made me stop breathing. Invitation to speak. TEDx conference. They wanted me to tell my story on stage, not in whispers to a camera, but in front of hundreds of people. They believed my journey wasn't just personal. It was universal. I sat staring at the screen, my heart pounding. This was more than validation. It was a call. All the years of silence, the tears in my dorm room, the rain-soaked night I walked away. Every moment had been leading here. I closed my eyes, imagining the red circle of the stage, the bright lights, the audience leaning forward. For the first time, I didn't picture my mother's absence in the crowd. I pictured strangers who needed to hear the words I once needed for myself. You are not invisible. You were never meant to be erased. And I whispered to myself as though sealing a vow. Yes, I'll do it. The living room smelled faintly of lavender and old wood polish when I finally walked back into my parents' house. My mother stood in the doorway, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she stepped forward, her face crumpling, and I felt her arms wrap around me. It was awkward at first, stiff with years of distance, but then the tension broke out, and we both collapsed into sobs. The sound wasn't graceful. It was raw, choking, ugly, but it was real. I buried my face in her shoulder, smelling the faint trace of detergent I remembered from childhood. She held me tightly, whispering, "I'm sorry," over and over as if repetition might erase the past. My tears wet her blouse. Her tears wet my hair. For the first time, it didn't matter who was holding on harder. We were both clinging to something fragile, terrified of letting go. There was silence after the storm of crying, the kind of silence that wasn't empty but full, a silence where the audience, if they could see, might lean back in their chairs and breathe, with us, sensing the weight lifting, the first notes of freedom. I felt lighter and heavier all at once, relief flooding me, grief anchoring me. Then she pulled back, her hands trembling on my shoulders. "Mia," she said, her voice cracking. "I love you. I always have. But I was so afraid. Losing your sister broke me in ways I couldn't admit. When I looked at you, I saw her ghost, and I couldn't risk loving you too much, because I thought if I lost you too, it would kill me." Her confession landed like both balm and blade. Sweet because it meant she had loved me all along, bitter because fear had stolen that love from me. I closed my eyes, letting the contradiction wash through me, both comforting and cutting. "I don't want to be a ghost," I whispered back. "I need to be your daughter, not her replacement, not your fear. Just me." She nodded, tears streaming, but in her eyes I saw it. The hesitation, the shadow of fear still lingering. She wanted to love me fully, but part of her heart still trembled at the thought of loss. That was the twist I hadn't expected. Even in reconciliation there was fragility. A bittersweet truth. Healing wasn't clean. It was messy, unfinished, alive. As we sat together, the air heavy with both love and uncertainty, I felt the cliffhanger inside me. Would this new bond endure? Or would it crack again under the weight of fear? The answer wasn't clear, and maybe it never would be. But for now, we were trying, and that was more than we had ever had before. Weeks later, I found myself standing backstage at the TEDx event, palms sweating, heart racing. The stage manager gave me a thumbs up, and the muffled sound of the audience waiting grew louder in my ears. I clutched my note cards, but knew I wouldn't need them. My story wasn't something to be read. It was something carved into me, impossible to forget. The lights blinded me as I stepped onto the red circle. For a heartbeat, I froze, feeling the weight of every eye. Then I breathed, lifted my head, and spoke. "Don't ever let anyone erase you from the frame of your own life." The words hung in the air, sharper than any opening line I'd rehearsed. Faces leaned forward, phones stopped buzzing. The silence became electric, the kind that means people are holding their breath with you. I told them about growing up invisible, about the nights I studied until dawn, hoping a grade would buy me love, about the photo I was pushed out of, about the envelope that changed everything. I told them pain had tried to bury me, but I had found a way to dig through and make the world see me. My voice cracked at times, but I let it. The cracks were proof. They were the jagged edges that made the truth impossible to polish away. I saw people crying in the audience, nodding, gripping each other's hands. My pain wasn't just mine anymore. It had become a bridge. When I finished, there was a heartbeat of silence, the world teetering on the edge. And then the entire room rose to its feet. Applause thundered, echoing through my body. I felt tears slip down my cheeks. But this time, I didn't hide them. Somewhere in that crowd, my mother sat in the back row. I didn't look directly at her, but I felt her presence, a tether that was fragile yet unbroken. Maybe she was still afraid. Maybe we both were. But she was there, and that mattered. As the applause swelled, cameras flashing, I stood alone in the circle of light. A new picture formed, not in a photo album or a phone screen, but in the memory of everyone watching. Me, centered, radiant, undeniable. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't outside the frame. I was the frame.